The lawyer's words hit Wade Finnegan like a freight train barreling through canyon walls. His uncle Silas had died 3 months ago in Oregon City, Oregon, leaving Wade not just a ranch, but a contractual obligation to marry a woman he had never met. It was April of 1878, and Wade sat in the cramped office on Main Street, dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, while the portly attorney with mutton chop whiskers explained that the deed came with the land, and the land came with a bride, and Wade had inherited both at once. "I do not understand," Wade said, leaning forward in the leather chair that creaked under his weight. "Uncle Silas arranged a marriage. For me," the lawyer, Mr. Pemberton, adjusted his spectacles and shuffled through the papers on his desk. "Not exactly for you, Mr. Finnegan. The arrangement was made with a family back east, the Parrishes of Boston. They sent their daughter Willa westward 2 years ago with the understanding that she would marry the owner of the Broken Pine Ranch. Your uncle never got around to the ceremony before he took ill. According to the contract, the marriage agreement transfers to the new owner of the property. That would be you." Wade ran a hand through his dark hair, his calloused fingers catching on tangles from the long ride up from California. He had been working cattle drives for the past 5 years, saving every penny, dreaming of the day he might own his own spread. Now he had one, but it came with strings attached that felt more like iron chains. "What if I refuse?" Pemberton cleared his throat. "Then the land reverts to the Parrish family, as stipulated in the agreement. Your uncle borrowed a considerable sum from them to keep the ranch operational during the hard years. Miss Parrish's marriage to the landowner was part of the repayment terms. Unusual, I grant you, but not unheard of in these arrangements." "Where is she now?" Wade asked, his voice tight. "Living at the ranch, naturally. She has been managing the property since your uncle's passing. From what I understand, she has done an admirable job keeping things running." Wade stood, his 6-foot frame casting a long shadow across the desk. He wore dusty trail clothes, his shirt sticking to his back with sweat, despite the mild spring weather. At 26 years old, he had imagined many scenarios for his future, but none of them involved an arranged marriage to a Boston socialite playing ranch hand. "I suppose I should meet my intended bride then." The ride out to Broken Pine Ranch took the better part of an hour. The property sat in a valley carved between timbered hills, with the Willamette River glinting silver in the distance. Oregon spring had painted the landscape in 1,000 shades of green, so different from the brown California ranges Wade had grown accustomed to. Wildflowers dotted the meadows, and the air smelled of pine and fresh earth. The ranch house came into view as Wade crested a gentle rise. It was a solid 2-story structure built from local timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. The barn and outbuildings looked well maintained, fences were mended, and cattle grazed peacefully in the near pasture. Whatever else this Willa Parrish might be, she clearly knew how to run a ranch. Wade dismounted near the barn, tying his buckskin gelding to the hitching post. He had barely touched ground when a voice rang out across the yard. "You must be Wade Finnegan." He turned to see a woman striding toward him from the horse corral, and his breath caught somewhere between his lungs and his throat. She was not what he had expected at all. Instead of some pampered Eastern lady in silk and lace, Willa Parrish wore practical canvas trousers tucked into worn boots, a chambray work shirt with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded a face dusted with freckles. Her honey-colored hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her gray-green eyes assessed him with an intelligence that felt almost unsettling in its directness. "I am," Wade replied, finding his voice. "And you are Miss Parrish." "Willa," she said, stopping a few feet away. She did not offer her hand, just crossed her arms over her chest. "I suppose Pemberton told you about the arrangement." "He did." Wade shifted his weight, suddenly feeling like an intruder on what should have been his own property. "This is an unusual situation. That is putting it mildly." Willa's expression remained neutral, but Wade caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Anger, resignation. He could not quite read it. "My father made a business arrangement with your uncle 5 years ago. He sent me west when I was 19 because I refused to marry the banker's son he had picked out for me. I thought anything would be better than that. Now I am not so certain." The blunt honesty of her words stung more than Wade expected. "You do not even know me." "Exactly my point." Willa turned and started walking toward the house. "Come on. I will show you around your property and we can discuss what happens next." Wade followed, leading his horse. As they walked, Willa pointed out various features of the ranch. She spoke with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of the land, every challenge and opportunity. "The broken pine ran about 300 head of cattle," she explained, "along with 24 horses. They employed 4 ranch hands year-round, with additional help brought in during roundup and branding seasons." "Your uncle was a good man," Willa said as they entered the barn. The interior was clean and organized, tack hanging neatly on the walls, fresh straw in the stalls. "He taught me everything about ranching. When he got sick last winter, I promised him I would keep this place running no matter what. I have honored that promise." "I can see that," Wade said, genuine respect coloring his tone. "This is impressive, Miss Parrish. Most men could not have managed what you have done here." She shot him a sharp look. "I am not most men. I learned quickly that out here you work or you die. Genteel Boston manners do not mend fences or birth calves." They spent the rest of the afternoon touring the property. Willa introduced Wade to the ranch hands. Jorge, a weathered Mexican vaquero who had been with Silas for 15 years. Tom and Charlie, brothers from Missouri who handled most of the horse breaking. And Samuel, a freed slave who had come west after the war and proved to be the best cattle hand Silas had ever hired. All 4 men clearly respected Willa, taking their orders from her without question. By evening, Wade's head was spinning with information about water rights, grazing rotations, and supply contracts. They returned to the ranch house as the sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and gold. Willa led him inside to a parlor that struck a balance between frontier practicality and eastern refinement. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while simple but well-crafted furniture filled the space. "You will take the master bedroom upstairs," Willa said, her tone businesslike. "I have been using the guest room down the hall. The hands eat in the bunkhouse, but I have been taking my meals here. You are welcome to join me if you wish." Wade set his saddlebags down near the stairs. "We need to talk about this arrangement, Willa." "I know." She removed her hat and Wade noticed how the lamplight caught gold highlights in her hair. "But not tonight. You have had a long journey and I am tired. Tomorrow morning after breakfast we can discuss what comes next." She was right, of course. Wade was exhausted and this conversation needed clear heads. "Tomorrow then. And Willa, thank you for keeping this place together. Uncle Silas would be proud." Something softened in her expression just for a moment. "He was the only person who ever believed I could be more than an ornament in some man's parlor. I owed him that much." Wade climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, a spacious room with a large bed, a washstand, and windows overlooking the valley. He stripped off his dusty clothes and washed as best he could with the pitcher and basin provided. His mind would not stop churning over the day's revelations. He had come to Oregon expecting to claim an inheritance. Instead, he had walked into a situation more complicated than anything he had faced on the trail. Willa Parrish was a puzzle. She had the bearing and speech of an educated Eastern woman, but the calloused hands and confident stride of a seasoned ranch hand. She clearly resented the arrangement that had brought her here, yet she had honored it by staying and working the land. Wade found himself curious about her story, about what had driven her to choose this harsh frontier life over the comforts of Boston society. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, it was filled with dreams of gray-green eyes and sun-gilded meadows. Morning arrived with the crowing of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle. Wade dressed in clean work clothes from his saddlebags and made his way downstairs. The smell of coffee and frying bacon drew him to the kitchen, where he found Willa already at the stove, her hair still damp from washing, her face scrubbed clean. "I hope you like your eggs scrambled," she said without turning around. "I never mastered the art of frying them without breaking the yolks. Scrambled is fine." Wade poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the table and sat down. The kitchen was warm and inviting, morning light streaming through gingham curtains. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Willa set down her fork and looked at him directly. "I have been thinking about our situation. I see 3 possible paths forward." "I am listening," Wade said. "First option, we honor the contract as written. We get married, you take ownership of the ranch, and we try to make the best of an arranged situation. Second option, you refuse the marriage, the land reverts to my family, and you walk away with nothing. Third option, we find a way to break the contract that satisfies both parties." Wade sipped his coffee, considering. "What do you want, Willa?" The question seemed to surprise her. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the valley beyond. "I want this ranch. I have poured 2 years of my life into this land. I know every fence post, every difficult cow, every spring that runs dry in August. This place is mine in every way that matters except legally." Her voice grew fierce. "But I will not marry a stranger just to keep it. I have more pride than that. Even if that means losing everything you have worked for, even then." She met his eyes, and Wade saw the steel in her gaze. "I came west to escape one prison. I will not walk willingly into another." Wade respected that. He had spent his adult life chasing freedom, riding from job to job, answering to no one but himself. The idea of trapping someone in an unwanted marriage sat poorly with him. "What if we found a middle path?" "What do you mean?" "We get married, as the contract requires. But we make it a partnership, not a prison. You continue running the ranch as you have been. We share the work and the profits equally. And if, after a year, we find we cannot stand each other, we figure out a way to part as fairly as possible." Willa studied him with those sharp eyes, looking for deception or hidden motives. "You would agree to that. Most men would not willingly share power with a woman. Most men did not inherit a thriving ranch because a woman kept it alive through a hard winter," Wade countered. "I would be a fool not to recognize your value as a partner. Besides, I have no desire to be married to someone who hates me." A smile tugged at the corner of Willa's mouth, the first genuine expression of warmth he had seen from her. "I suppose that is reasonable. But understand this, Wade Finnegan. I will not be some docile wife who smiles and nods while you make all the decisions. If we do this, we do it as equals or not at all. Agreed?" Wade extended his hand across the table. "Partners?" Willa hesitated only a moment before grasping his hand firmly. Her palm was warm and rough with calluses that matched his own. "Partners. But Wade, we take this slowly. I need to know who you are before I can trust you with my future." "That seems fair. I could say the same about you." They shook on it, and in that moment, Wade felt the first stirring of something beyond mere obligation. Willa Parrish intrigued him in ways he had not anticipated. She was sharp-witted, courageous, and clearly capable. The fact that she was beautiful did not hurt either, though he pushed that thought aside. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. At least, that was what he told himself. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Wade and Willa agreed to wait a month before the wedding, wanting time to get to know each other and establish their working relationship. Wade threw himself into ranch work, rising before dawn to help with feeding and repairs, riding out with the hands to check fence lines and move cattle to fresh grazing. He quickly learned that Willa had not exaggerated her abilities. She could rope and ride with the best of them, and her understanding of animal husbandry impressed even Jorge, who had 4 decades of experience. She was also fearless, whether facing down an ornery bull or negotiating prices with the slick buyers who came through looking for cheap beef. But it was the small moments that began to shift something in Wade's heart. The way Willa laughed, a full-bodied sound of pure joy when one of the barn cats had kittens. How she sat on the porch in the evenings, playing a harmonica her uncle had given her, filling the twilight with melancholy tunes. The gentleness in her hands when she doctored a calf's injured leg, murmuring soft reassurances. Wade found himself watching her more than he should, noticing details he had no business noticing. The graceful curve of her neck when she tilted her head, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating on a difficult task, the sound of her voice, slightly husky, especially in the mornings. He was in dangerous territory, and he knew it. One evening, about 3 weeks into his stay, Wade found Willa in the barn tending to a mare that was close to foaling. The animal paced restlessly in her stall, her sides heaving. "How long has she been like this?" Wade asked, leaning on the stall door. "Since this afternoon. This is her first foal, so she is nervous." Willa stroked the mare's neck soothingly. "I will stay with her tonight. First-time mothers sometimes need help." "I will stay with you," Wade offered. 2 sets of hands are better than one if there is trouble. Willa looked at him with surprise, then nodded. "Thank you. I would appreciate that." They settled in to wait, sitting on hay bales with a lantern hanging from a post. The barn was quiet except for the occasional shuffle of horses in their stalls and the mare's labored breathing. Wade produced a flask of whiskey from his vest pocket and offered it to Willa. She took a small sip and handed it back. "Tell me something about yourself, Wade Finnegan. Something real, not just where you have worked or what you can do." Wade considered the question, rolling the flask between his palms. "I was the youngest of 4 brothers. My father had a small farm in Missouri, barely enough land to support one family, let alone divvy up among 4 boys. When I was 17, I headed west, figured I would make my own way rather than fight my brothers for scraps." "You miss them, your family?" "Sometimes." Wade took a drink, feeling the burn of whiskey down his throat. "My mother writes occasionally. Letters take months to catch up with me. Last I heard, 2 of my brothers were still farming, one opened a mercantile. They have families now, kids I have never met. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice leaving like that." "But you do not regret it," Willa said. "It was not a question. No, I love this life, hard as it is. The freedom of it, waking up not knowing what the day will bring, testing yourself against the elements and coming out the other side stronger." He glanced at her. "I suppose you understand that feeling given what you left behind, more than you know." Willa was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "My mother died when I was 12. After that, my father became obsessed with marrying me off to the right sort of man, someone who could elevate our social standing. He paraded me in front of every eligible bachelor in Boston like prize livestock at auction." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Wade waited, sensing there was more. The final straw was Richard Blackwell. Willa nearly spat the name. He was 43 years old, a banker with political ambitions and a reputation for cruelty to his servants. My father arranged the engagement without even asking me. When I refused, he told me I was being shipped west to marry some frontier rancher. He made it sound like a punishment, but it turned out to be salvation. Your father sounds like a piece of work, Wade said carefully. He is a man who sees people as assets to be managed and traded. I have not written to him since I left Boston. As far as I am concerned, Silas was more of a father to me than Charles Parrish ever was. She looked at Wade, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. What about you? What do you want from this life, Wade? Besides land and freedom, the question hit deeper than she probably intended. Wade found himself thinking about things he usually kept buried. The loneliness of the trail, the cold comfort of empty campfires, the ache of wanting something more permanent but being too afraid to reach for it. I want to build something that lasts, he admitted. Every job I have had, every place I have been, it was all temporary. Here today, gone tomorrow. I want roots, a place that is mine where I can watch the seasons turn year after year, maybe a family someday, though I had given up on that particular dream. Why had you given up on it? Wade shrugged, uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. The life I was living did not leave room for that. You cannot build a family when you are never in one place longer than a few months, and I never met anyone who made me want to change that pattern. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them was quite ready to address. Before Willa could respond, the mare whinnied sharply, her distress obvious. They both jumped to their feet. The foaling was starting, and it was not going well. The mare was down in the straw, straining hard, but nothing was happening. Wade could see Willa's expression shift from concern to alarm. The foal is positioned wrong, she said, stripping off her vest and rolling up her sleeves. I need to try to turn it. What followed was an intense hour of work. Wade held the mare's head, keeping her as calm as possible while Willa worked with steady hands and murmured encouragements. Sweat soaked through their clothes despite the cool night air. Several times, Wade thought they were going to lose both mare and foal, but Willa refused to give up. Finally, with a rush of fluid and one last powerful contraction, the foal slipped free into the straw. It was not breathing. Without hesitation, Willa cleared the membrane from its nose and mouth, then began rubbing it vigorously with handfuls of straw, stimulating circulation. "Come on, baby," she whispered fiercely. "Come on, breathe." Wade watched, his heart in his throat. The foal lay motionless for what felt like an eternity. Then, suddenly, it gasped and coughed, its sides heaving as it drew breath. Willa laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy, and Wade found himself grinning like a fool. The mare struggled to her feet and immediately began nuzzling her foal, licking it clean with long, loving strokes. Within minutes, the foal was trying to stand on wobbly legs, seeking its first meal. Wade and Willa backed out of the stall, giving the new family space. They stood side by side in the barn aisle, both exhausted and exhilarated. Willa's face was streaked with sweat and straw dust, her hair falling loose from its braid. She had never looked more beautiful to Wade. "That was incredible," he said. "You were incredible." Willa turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears of relief. "We did it together. If you had not been here to keep her calm, I could not have worked on the foal." They were standing very close, Wade realized. Close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her gray-green eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. His heart was pounding, and not from the exertion of the foaling. "Willa," he said softly, not even sure what he wanted to say, just needing to speak her name. She looked up at him, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them in the lamplight, everything else fading away. Wade saw the moment she felt it too, that pull of attraction neither of them had acknowledged until now. Her lips parted slightly, and he found himself leaning closer. Then Willa stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "We should clean up. It is late." The moment broke like dropped glass. Wade nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment flooding through him. "Right, yes, you go ahead. I will make sure everything is settled here." Willa left without another word, and Wade stood alone in the barn, listening to the soft sounds of the mare with her new foal. He had come to Oregon expecting to claim land and nothing more. Instead, he was falling for a woman who might never be able to trust him enough to let him into her heart. The next morning, an uncomfortable tension hung between them at breakfast. Willa was polite but distant, and Wade did not push. They both threw themselves into work, using physical labor as a shield against uncomfortable feelings. 3 days later, everything changed. Wade and Samuel were moving cattle to a new pasture when riders appeared on the ridge above them. 6 men on horseback, rough-looking characters with the lean, hungry look of trouble. Wade's hand drifted to the rifle in his saddle scabbard as they approached. The leader was a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek and cold eyes the color of dirty ice. "This is Broken Pine land," he called out. "It is," Wade replied, keeping his voice neutral. "What can I do for you gentlemen?" "Name is Caleb Morton. My boss, Russell Kemper, owns the Double K Ranch to the south. He sent me to deliver a message to Miss Parrish." Wade did not like the way the man said Willa's name, like he was tasting something foul. "You can deliver your message to me. I am the owner of Broken Pine." "That's so." Morton's smile was unpleasant. "Heard old Silas kicked it a few months back. Heard his niece has been trying to run the place herself. Shame, really. Pretty little thing like that should not be trying to do a man's work." Samuel tensed in his saddle beside Wade, and Wade put a subtle hand out to stay him. "The message," he said coldly. "Mr. Kemper is prepared to make a generous offer for Broken Pine, more than fair, considering the property's current state. Miss Parrish should consider it carefully. Things can get dangerous out here for folks without proper protection." The threat was barely veiled. Wade felt anger rise in his chest but kept his expression carefully neutral. "Broken Pine is not for sale. Now if you would kindly remove yourselves from my land." Morton's eyes hardened. "Your land? That is interesting. I will be sure to let Mr. Kemper know the situation has changed. But the offer stands. Think about it. Accidents happen all the time on ranches. Fires, stampedes, all manner of unfortunate events. Be a shame if something happened to that pretty lady you have got up at the house." Wade moved before he consciously decided to, his horse bringing him alongside Morton's mount, his hand grabbing the front of the man's shirt. "If you or any of your boys come near Willa, if you so much as look at her wrong, I will kill you. Do you understand me?" For a moment, real fear flickered in Morton's eyes. Then he jerked free, wheeling his horse around. "You have been warned, Finnegan. Remember that when things start going wrong." The 6 riders galloped away, leaving dust hanging in the air. Samuel whistled low. "That is bad business, boss. Russell Kemper has been trying to buy up all the land in this valley for years. He does not take no for an answer kindly." "Who is he?" Wade asked, watching the riders disappear over the ridge. "Richest man in 3 counties. Came out here after the war with money from back east and started buying up land. Rumor is he wants to control all the water rights in the region. Broken Pine sits right on the Willamette River. Without access through this property, Kemper's cattle have to travel an extra 15 miles to water." Wade swore under his breath. This was worse than a simple land grab. Water was life out here. Without it, Kemper's operation would be severely hampered. That made Broken Pine a target, and it made Willa vulnerable. They finished moving the cattle and rode hard back to the ranch house. Wade found Willa in the horse corral, working a young gelding on a lunge line. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. What happened? Wade told her about the encounter with Morton and Kemper's threat. As he spoke, he watched anger and something like fear cross her expression. Kemper has been sniffing around since before Silas died, Willa said, her jaw tight. He showed up here twice, making offers. Silas threw him off the property both times. After Silas passed, Kemper came back with an even lower offer, assuming I would be desperate enough to sell. I told him the same thing Silas did, only less politely. Why did you not mention this before? Because I handled it, Willa snapped. I did not need protecting then, and I do not need it now. This is not about protecting you, Wade said, though that was not entirely true. The thought of anyone hurting Willa made his blood boil. This is about protecting our property. If Kemper is willing to make threats, he is willing to follow through on them. We need to be prepared. Willa's anger deflated slightly. She released the horse and walked to the fence, gripping the rails with white-knuckled hands. You are right. I am sorry. It is just that I spent so long being treated like I could not take care of myself. It is hard to accept help, even when I need it. Wade joined her at the fence, careful to maintain a respectful distance. This is what partners do, Willa. We face problems together. That is what you agreed to when we shook hands. She looked at him, and some of the walls she had built around herself seemed to crack just a little. I am not used to having a partner. Neither am I. I suppose we will learn together. That evening, Wade called a meeting with all the ranch hands. He explained the situation with Kemper and asked everyone to be extra vigilant. They would work in pairs from now on, no one out alone. They would take turns keeping watch at night, and everyone would carry a rifle when out on the range. Jorge nodded approvingly. Silas would do the same. We watch out for each other, no. This is good land. We do not let some rich pig take it from us. The next few weeks were tense. Wade found himself constantly scanning the horizon, half expecting to see smoke or find cut fences. But nothing happened. Either Kemper was biding his time, or he had decided the trouble was not worth it. Wade and Willa fell into a comfortable working rhythm. They divided responsibilities based on their strengths. Willa handled the books and managing supplies, areas where her education served her well, while Wade took point on the heavier physical work and dealing with buyers. But they consulted on every major decision, true to their agreement to be equal partners. Somewhere in those busy days, something shifted between them. Wade found himself making excuses to be near Willa, to hear her laugh or see her smile. The way she hummed while cooking breakfast. How she always saved the best cuts of meat for the ranch dogs. The fierce concentration on her face when she was balancing the accounts. He was falling for her, hard and fast, and he had no idea if she felt the same way. Their wedding day arrived with surprising speed. It was a simple ceremony in the small church in Oregon City, attended by the ranch hands and a few neighbors. Willa wore a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders for the first time since Wade had met her. She looked beautiful and terrified in equal measure. The reverend went through the traditional vows, and Wade found himself meaning every word, even though this had started as a business arrangement. When he slipped the simple gold band onto Willa's finger, her hand trembled slightly in his. I now pronounce you man and wife, the reverend intoned. You may kiss your bride. Wade looked at Willa, a question in his eyes. She nodded just barely, and he leaned in to brush his lips against hers. It was meant to be perfunctory, a mere formality to seal the ceremony. But the moment their lips met, something electric passed between them. The kiss lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but it was enough to leave Wade breathless and wanting more. They pulled apart, and Wade saw his own confusion mirrored in Willa's eyes. Then she turned to face their small gathering of well-wishers, and the moment passed. The ranch hands had prepared a simple celebration back at Broken Pine. There was a roasted pig, fresh bread, and a fiddle player who knew every reel and jig ever written. Despite the modest surroundings, it felt like a real celebration. Wade found himself dancing with Willa, her hand warm in his, her body fitting perfectly against his own as they swung through the steps. "Are you happy?" he asked during a slower tune, their faces close together. Willa considered the question seriously. "I am not unhappy," she finally said. "That is more than I expected when I first heard you were coming. You are a good man, Wade Finnegan, better than I probably deserve." "That is nonsense," Wade said fiercely. "You deserve everything good this world has to offer." Something flickered in her eyes, vulnerable and hopeful. "Do you really believe that?" "I do." The music ended and they separated, but Wade felt like something important had just happened, some wall between them finally beginning to crumble. That night, they stood awkwardly in the upstairs hallway of the ranch house. They had not discussed the sleeping arrangements, both of them dancing around the elephant in the room. "I will take the guest room," Wade said. "This does not have to be a real marriage until you are ready, if you are ever ready. No pressure, Willa. I meant what I said about being partners first." The relief on her face was evident, but there was something else too, something that might have been disappointment. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know." Wade nodded and headed to the guest room, trying to ignore the part of him that wanted to kiss her again, wanted to see if that spark from the ceremony had been real or just his imagination. Summer came to Oregon in full force, bringing long days of hard work. Haying season kept everyone busy from sunup to sundown. Wade worked alongside the hands, his shirt soaked with sweat, muscles burning from forking hay into the wagon. Willa was right there with them, refusing to let the men do all the heavy lifting. "You are going to hurt yourself," Wade told her during a water break, watching her struggle with a particularly heavy fork full. "I have been doing this since I got here," Willa replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "I am stronger than I look," she was, but Wade still worried. He had started worrying about her a lot lately, about whether she was eating enough, whether she was working too hard, whether she was happy. It was not something he had expected when he had agreed to this arrangement. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Wade had 2 cold beers he had brought up from the root cellar, and he handed one to Willa. "To surviving haying season," he said, raising his bottle. Willa clinked her bottle against his. "Almost surviving. We still have another week." They drank in companionable silence. The air was finally cooling after the heat of the day, and the sounds of evening insects filled the twilight. Wade found himself studying Willa's profile in the fading light, the elegant line of her jaw, the way her hair curled slightly where it escaped her braid. "Can I ask you something personal?" Willa said suddenly. "Of course. Why did you agree to share the ranch with me?" "You could have refused the marriage, walked away, tried to find another way to make your fortune. Most men would not have given up that kind of pride." Wade thought about his answer carefully. "I suppose, because from the moment I met you, I knew you belonged here more than I did. This is your land, Willa. You earned it with sweat and sacrifice. I just happened to be the lucky fool who inherited the deed. Walking away would have been easy. Doing the right thing, giving you a path to keep what is yours, that felt more important than my pride." Willa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "No one has ever done anything like that for me before. Everyone in my life they have always taken. My father, the men he wanted me to marry, they all saw me as something to be used for their benefit. You are the first person who has ever given without expecting something in return. That is not entirely true, Wade admitted. I did get something in return, a partner I respect, a ranch that is thriving, and if I am being honest, the chance to know someone I find remarkable. Willa turned to look at him, and Wade saw tears glistening in her eyes. You really think that? That I am remarkable? I do. You are the strongest, most capable person I have ever met. You are smart and funny, and you have more courage in your little finger than most men have in their whole bodies. Anyone who could not see that is a fool. A single tear rolled down Willa's cheek, and she made no move to wipe it away. Wade Finnegan, you are going to make me fall in love with you if you keep talking like that. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Wade's heart was hammering in his chest. Would that be so terrible? No, Willa whispered. That is what terrifies me. I have been so scared of caring about someone, of giving them power to hurt me. But you, Wade, you have gotten under my skin despite my best efforts to keep you at arm's length. Wade set down his beer and shifted closer to her on the porch swing. I have been falling for you since the night we delivered that foal together, maybe even before that. I know this started as a business arrangement, but it has become so much more for me. You have become so much more. Willa reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I am scared, she admitted. What if this does not work? What if I am not enough? You are more than enough, Wade said, covering her hand with his own. But I understand the fear. We can take this as slowly as you need. There is no rush. I do not want to go slowly anymore, Willa said, and then she was kissing him. This kiss was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. This was fire and need and months of restrained attraction finally breaking free. Wade pulled Willa into his lap, his hands tangling in her hair, and she responded with equal passion, her fingers gripping his shoulders like she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Willa rested her forehead against his. Take me to bed, Wade. Not as a business arrangement or a legal obligation. Take me to bed because you want me and I want you. Wade stood, lifting Willa in his arms, and carried her into the house and up the stairs to the master bedroom they had been occupying separately for months. He set her down gently on the edge of the bed, and in the lamplight they came together as husband and wife, not just in name but in truth. The next morning, Wade woke with Willa curled against his side, her head on his chest, one arm thrown across his waist. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and he could hear the ranch coming to life outside, the sounds of cattle and horses and men going about their work. For the first time in his adult life, Wade felt completely content. He had found what he had been searching for without even knowing he was looking. A home, a purpose, and a woman he loved more than anything else in this world. Willa stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him watching her, a slow smile spread across her face. Good morning, husband. Good morning, wife. Wade kissed her forehead. Any regrets? Not a single one. You. Only that we wasted so much time dancing around this. Willa laughed, a sound of pure happiness. We had to do things in our own time. Neither of us was ready before now. She was probably right. They had both been carrying so much fear and mistrust, baggage from their pasts that had needed time to unpack. But now, finally, they were ready to build something real together. They might have stayed in bed all morning, but a sharp knock on the door interrupted them. Jorge's voice called through the wood, urgent and concerned. Boss, Miss Willa, you need to come quick. We got trouble. Wade and Willa dressed quickly and hurried downstairs. Jorge met them on the porch, his weathered face creased with worry. What is it? Wade asked. Fire in the north pasture. Someone said it deliberately. Samuel spotted riders heading away just before dawn, but by the time he raised the alarm, the grass was already burning. Wade swore viciously. Kemper. It had to be. They had been lulled into a false sense of security, thinking maybe the man had given up. Instead, he had just been biding his time. The next hour was chaos. Everyone on the ranch, including Willa, grabbed buckets and shovels and raced to fight the fire. Fortunately, Oregon's wet spring had left enough moisture in the ground that the fire had not spread as fast as it might have. They managed to contain it to about 20 acres before finally getting it under control. Wade stood in the blackened grass, soot covering his face and clothes, and surveyed the damage. 20 acres was not catastrophic, but it was a message. Kemper was showing them he could strike whenever he wanted, that they were vulnerable. "We need to go to the sheriff," Willa said, appearing at his side. She was equally filthy, her face streaked with ash. "And tell him what? That we saw riders but cannot prove who they were or what they did. Kemper will just deny it, and we will look like we are making accusations we cannot back up." "So we do nothing." Willa's voice was sharp with frustration. "No, we prepare. If Kemper wants a war, we will give him one." Over the next few days, Wade made trips into Oregon City, talking to other ranchers who had dealt with Kemper's strong-arm tactics. He learned that at least 3 other properties in the valley had sold to Kemper after experiencing mysterious accidents and misfortunes. 2 ranchers had lost barns to fire. One had cattle poisoned. Another had his water supply contaminated. It was a pattern of intimidation and destruction, always just subtle enough that nothing could be proven in court. Kemper was careful, using intermediaries and making sure he always had an alibi. Wade also learned something else. Kemper was overextended. He had borrowed heavily to purchase all the land he had acquired, betting that he could control the water rights and force out the remaining holdouts. If that plan failed, if Broken Pine refused to sell, Kemper's whole empire might come crashing down. That gave Wade an idea. He spent an evening going over the ranch accounts with Willa, looking at their finances with fresh eyes. They were in decent shape, enough to weather a difficult season or two. But more importantly, they had something Kemper wanted desperately: water access. "What if we offered other ranchers access to the river?" Wade proposed. "For a fee, of course, but reasonable. That would break Kemper's monopoly and make our land less strategically valuable to him. If he cannot force everyone to go through him for water, his whole strategy falls apart." Willa's eyes lit up with understanding. "That is brilliant. We turn his greatest weapon against him." "But will the other ranchers trust us? Some of them might be too scared of Kemper to take the deal." "We start with the ones who have already stood up to him. Build a coalition. There is strength in numbers." It took 2 weeks of careful negotiation, but Wade and Willa managed to convince 4 other ranchers to join them in a mutual protection agreement. They would share resources, watch out for each other's property, and all use Broken Pine's river access. In exchange, each ranch paid a small fee and agreed to help the others in times of trouble. The agreement was signed in the Broken Pine parlor. 6 ranchers and their wives crowded into the space, passing around whiskey and feeling like they had just struck a blow for independence. For the first time since Kemper had started his land grab, the small ranchers had found a way to fight back. Kemper's response was swift and vicious. 3 days after the agreement was signed, one of the coalition ranchers, a man named Thomas Worth, was ambushed on the road home from Oregon City. He survived, but just barely, and was left with a bullet wound in his shoulder and a message: "Withdraw from the agreement or next time they would not miss." Wade visited Worth at his ranch, finding the man in bed with his arm in a sling, his wife keeping vigil at his bedside. Worth was pale but angry. "I am not backing down. he said through gritted teeth. My daddy fought in the war so men like Kemper could not own everything. I will be damned if I let some eastern carpetbagger bully me off my own land. You do not have to do this, Wade said. Your family is more important than any agreement. That is exactly why I am doing this, Worth's wife spoke up, her voice firm. What kind of future do our children have if we teach them to bow down to bullies? We stand with you, Mr. Finnegan, no matter what. Similar conversations played out across the coalition. Despite the intimidation, despite the very real danger, every single rancher held firm. They had found something worth fighting for, their independence and their dignity. But Wade knew this could not go on. Someone was going to get killed if they did not find a way to stop Kemper. That meant going on the offensive. He began gathering evidence, quietly and carefully. He talked to former employees of the Double K who had quit rather than participate in Kemper's illegal activities. He documented every incident of intimidation and sabotage. And he hired a lawyer from Portland, a man with a reputation for taking on powerful interests and winning. The lawyer, Henry Morrison, was a thin man with sharp eyes and sharper mind. He listened to Wade's evidence and nodded slowly. You have got enough here for a case, but taking on Kemper in court is dangerous. He has bought off half the judges in Oregon. So what do we do? Wade asked. We do not go through the local courts. We take this to the federal level. Kemper's tactics include interference with interstate commerce, which is a federal crime. We bring in federal marshals, make this bigger than one county's corrupt system can cover up. It was risky, but it was also their best shot. Morrison drafted the complaint, and Wade personally rode to Portland to file it with the federal court. The process would take time, but at least the wheels were in motion. In the meantime, summer faded into autumn. The coalition held together, ranchers helping ranchers, watching each other's backs. There were more incidents of sabotage and intimidation, but nothing as dramatic as the fire or the shooting. It was like Kemper was testing their resolve, waiting for someone to crack. No one did through it all. Wade and Willa's relationship deepened and strengthened. They had gone from strangers to partners to lovers, and now they were something even more profound, a team united against adversity. The pressure of the situation with Kemper paradoxically brought them closer together, forcing them to trust each other completely. Wade found himself marveling at Willa's strength. She never complained, never suggested giving up, even when things looked darkest. She stood on the porch with a rifle across her lap during night watch shifts. She personally delivered supplies to the Worth family when Thomas was recovering. She organized the coalition's wives to create a communication network, ensuring everyone knew what was happening across the valley. One evening in late September, they sat together in the parlor going over accounts. Willa suddenly set down her pen and looked at Wade with an expression he could not quite read. "What is it?" he asked. "I am pregnant," she said simply. Wade felt like he had been hit by lightning. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it." "I am 6 weeks late and I have been sick every morning for 2 weeks." A dozen emotions crashed through Wade at once: joy, terror, excitement, fear. "That is wonderful," he managed. "Terrifying, but wonderful." Willa laughed, though there were tears in her eyes. "I feel the same way. I never thought I would be a mother. I never let myself want it, because wanting things just led to disappointment. But now that it is happening, I find I want this baby more than anything." Wade crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder coloring his voice. "We are going to have a family." "Are you happy?" Willa asked, her face pressed against his chest. "Happier than I have ever been in my life." They held each other in the lamplight. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by a bizarre contractual obligation, now bound by something far stronger: love and the promise of new life. The news of Willa's pregnancy gave Wade even more resolve to end the situation with Kemper. His child would not grow up in the shadow of threats and fear. He would create a safe world for this baby if it was the last thing he did. The federal marshals arrived in Oregon City in early October. There were 3 of them, led by a tough old bird named Marshal Garrett, who had seen every kind of frontier lawlessness. Wade spent a full day going over the evidence with them, along with testimony from the other ranchers and former Double K employees. Garrett nodded approvingly. "You have built a solid case here, Mr. Finnegan. We will need a few weeks to complete our investigation, but I feel confident we will be paying Mr. Kemper a visit soon." "How soon?" Wade pressed. "These things take time. We do it right by the book so nothing gets thrown out in court." "I know that is not what you want to hear, but it is the reality." Wade accepted that, though it chafed to wait while Kemper continued his campaign of intimidation. But Garrett was true to his word. Over the next month, the marshals methodically built their case, interviewing witnesses, documenting crimes, following the money trail. In mid-November, they made their move. Wade was not present for the arrest, but he heard about it later from witnesses in town. The marshals had ridden out to the Double K with warrants and arrested Kemper and 4 of his men, including Caleb Morton, on charges of arson, attempted murder, intimidation, and interference with interstate commerce. The trial was held in Portland in January of 1879. Wade and Willa traveled to the city to testify, along with several other coalition members. The proceedings lasted 3 weeks, and when it was over, Russell Kemper was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. His property was seized to pay his debts and compensate his victims. It was over. Finally, truly over. Wade and Willa rode back to Broken Pine in late January, the landscape dusted with snow, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Willa was 6 months pregnant now, her belly swelling with their child, and Wade had never seen her look more beautiful. "We did it," she said as the ranch came into view. "We actually did it. We did," Wade agreed. "This land is truly ours now. No more threats, no more looking over our shoulders." They had fought for their home and won. Now they could focus on building the life they wanted. Their son was born on a warm spring evening in May of 1879. The labor was long and difficult, and Wade paced the downstairs hallway while the midwife and doctor attended Willa upstairs. Every cry of pain from his wife felt like a knife in his heart, and he found himself praying to a God he had not talked to in years. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he heard a new sound: the lusty wail of a newborn. The midwife appeared at the top of the stairs, her face creased in a smile. "You have a healthy son, Mr. Finnegan, and your wife is doing well." Wade took the stairs 3 at a time. He burst into the bedroom to find Willa propped up on pillows, exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she said softly. Wade approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the tiny red face, the miniature fingers curled into fists, and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. This was his son, his and Willa's, a living symbol of everything they had built together. "He is perfect," Wade whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "You are perfect. I cannot believe we made this." "What should we name him?" Willa asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definitive. Now, looking at his son, Wade knew exactly what felt right. "Silas," he said. After the man who brought us together and taught you everything you needed to survive out here, Silas Finnegan. Tears spilled from Willa's eyes. He would have loved that. Yes, Silas it is. They sat together, the three of them. A family forged not by blood alone but by choice, by struggle, by love that had been tested and proven true. The years that followed were good ones. The Broken Pine Ranch prospered under Wade and Willa's joint management. The coalition of ranchers they had formed remained strong, creating a supportive community where everyone helped everyone else. They added to their herd, improved their breeding stock, and built a reputation for quality cattle. Willa proved to be a natural mother, though she refused to give up her role in running the ranch. She wore baby Silas in a sling while working in the garden or managing the books, and when he got older, he toddled after his parents around the ranch yard, learning the rhythms of ranch life from infancy. 2 years after Silas was born, Willa gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Alina. Wade was outnumbered by females in his household now, but he could not have been happier. The girls had their mother's honey hair and sharp intelligence, and they wrapped Wade around their tiny fingers from day one. The ranch house rang with laughter and the sounds of children playing. Wade built a swing in the old oak tree by the creek, and summer evenings often found the whole family down by the water, the children splashing and playing while Wade and Willa watched from the bank, their fingers intertwined. Did you ever imagine this? Willa asked one such evening when Silas was 8 and the twins were 6. When you rode up here that first day, expecting to claim an inheritance, did you imagine you would end up with all this? Wade pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Not in my wildest dreams. I thought I was coming to claim land. Instead, I found a home, a partner, a family. I found everything I did not even know I needed. I was so angry when you showed up, Willa admitted. I thought you would be like every other man I had known, trying to take what I had built and push me aside. Instead, you gave me more than I could have hoped for. You gave me respect, partnership, love. You gave me freedom to be myself. You did the same for me, Wade said. Before I met you, I was just drifting. Now I have roots that go down deep into this land. I belong here with you, with our children. This is where I am meant to be. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Wade Finnegan looked out over his land and his family and felt a contentment so profound, it was almost painful. He had inherited a deed and a bride, 2 things he had not wanted and did not understand. From that unlikely beginning, he had built a life richer than any he could have imagined. The children grew, as children do. Silas developed his mother's sharp mind and his father's easy way with horses. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into twice as much trouble as any single child could manage. They all learned to ride almost before they could walk, learned to rope and work cattle, learned the value of hard work and keeping your word. Wade and Willa made sure their children knew the story of how the ranch came to be, how their parents had started as strangers bound by a contract and became partners bound by love. They taught them that family was not just about blood but about choice, about standing by the people you cared for even when times were hard. The coalition of ranchers became a permanent fixture in the valley. What had started as a defensive measure evolved into a thriving cooperative, with the ranchers sharing equipment, breeding stock, and labor during busy seasons. The Worth family remained particularly close with the Finnegans, the 2 families celebrating holidays together and supporting each other through good times and bad. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Willa on a trip to Portland, leaving the children in the capable hands of Jorge and his wife Maria. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at fancy restaurants, and spent 3 days pretending they were sophisticated city folk instead of hard-working ranchers. On their last evening, they stood on the balcony of their hotel room, watching the city lights twinkle in the darkness. Willa leaned against Wade's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Thank you for this," she said, "for reminding me that there is a world beyond cattle and endless chores." "Thank you for agreeing to marry me," Wade replied, "even though you had no choice in the matter at first." Willa turned in his arms to face him. "I did have a choice. I could have walked away, let the land go, started over somewhere else. I chose to stay, and I chose to give us a chance. It was the best decision I ever made." "Mine too," Wade said, and kissed her with the same passion he had felt on their wedding night, the same hunger that had only grown deeper with time. More years passed in a blur of seasons and work and family celebrations. Silas grew into a responsible young man who took increasing responsibility for the ranch operations. The twins developed distinct personalities despite their identical looks. Emma was bold and adventurous, while Alina was thoughtful and studious. When Silas turned 18 in 1897, Wade and Willa held a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the valley to mark the occasion. As Wade watched his son accept congratulations and backslaps from the assembled crowd, he marveled at how much time had passed. 19 years since he had ridden up to this ranch, not knowing what awaited him. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had departed, Wade and Willa sat on the porch swing they had shared so many times over the years. Silas was inside with his sisters, cleaning up from the party. The sound of their laughter and bickering drifted through the open windows. "We did good," Willa said, taking Wade's hand. "Look at what we built, Wade. Not just the ranch, but our family, our life here. We took something that started as an obligation and turned it into something beautiful." Wade squeezed her hand, feeling the familiar roughness of her palm, the calluses that matched his own from years of shared labor. Gray touched her honey hair now, and lines creased her face, but she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "I fell in love with you that night in the barn," he confessed. "When we were delivering the foal and you were so determined, so fierce. I looked at you covered in sweat and straw, fighting to save that baby horse, and I thought, this is the woman I want beside me for the rest of my life." "I fell in love with you when you offered to share the ranch," Willa said. "When you put my needs ahead of your pride. That was when I knew you were different from every other man I had ever met." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the soft nickering of horses in the barn, the hoot of an owl hunting in the woods. This was their kingdom, built with sweat and sacrifice, defended against those who would take it, and filled with love. As they sat there, Silas came out onto the porch, a serious expression on his young face. "Can I talk to you both about something?" "Of course," Wade said, making room on the swing. Silas perched on the porch railing, his posture reminding Wade so much of himself at that age. "I have been thinking about my future, about what I want to do with my life." Wade felt a twinge of concern. "Go on." "I love this ranch. I love this life. But I think I need to see what else is out there before I commit to it completely. I want to travel, maybe work some other ranches, see different parts of the country. Not forever, just for a year or two." Wade looked at Willa, seeing his own mixed emotions reflected in her eyes. Part of him wanted to argue, to convince his son to stay. But he understood the need that drove Silas. It was the same restlessness that had driven Wade west all those years ago. "I think that is a wise idea," Willa said, her voice steady even though Wade knew this was hard for her. "You should know your own mind before you take on the responsibility of this place. We will be here when you are ready to come home." Silas's relief was evident. "Thank you, both of you, for understanding." After Silas went back inside, Wade pulled Willa close. "That was hard for you." "Terribly hard," she admitted. "But we cannot cage him just because we want to keep him safe. He needs to make his own path, just like we did." "When did we get so wise?" Wade asked with a slight smile. "I think it happened gradually when we were not paying attention." Silas left in early spring of 1898, heading south to California to work the big cattle drives. Wade and Willa watched him ride away, both of them trying not to cry. The ranch felt emptier without him, but life went on. The twins stepped up to fill some of the gaps, and Wade found himself teaching them skills he had planned to teach his son. Emma proved to have a natural gift with horses, able to gentle even the most stubborn animals. Eleanor showed an aptitude for the business side, helping her mother with the accounts and proving herself a shrewd negotiator when buyers came around. Silas wrote regularly, long letters describing his adventures and the places he saw. He worked ranches in California, Arizona, and eventually as far east as Texas. He learned new techniques, met interesting people, and generally had the kind of adventures young men needed to have. 2 years after he left, Silas came home. Wade and Willa were in the barn when he rode up on a fine black horse, his bedroll tied behind his saddle, his face bronzed by sun and wind. He looked older, more confident, but his smile when he saw his parents was the same as always. "I am home," he said simply. "If you will have me." Wade embraced his son tightly, not trusting his voice to speak. Willa was crying openly, laughing and sobbing at the same time. "This will always be your home," Wade finally managed. "No matter where you go or how long you are gone, you are always welcome here." That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Silas entertained them with stories of his travels, and Wade and Willa caught him up on ranch news. It felt complete again, everyone together around the table. After dinner, Wade walked with Silas out to the horse corral, where the black horse Silas had ridden home was settling in with the other animals. "Fine-looking mount," Wade commented. "Got him in California. Best cow horse I ever rode." Silas leaned on the fence and Wade joined him. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "All right." "I met someone down in Texas. Her name is Sarah. She is the daughter of the rancher I was working for. We want to get married, but I told her I needed to come home first, make sure you and Mom were all right with me bringing a wife here." Wade felt a surge of emotion, pride, joy, a bit of melancholy at how fast his children were growing up. "Of course we would be all right with it. We would be honored. When do we get to meet this Sarah?" "She is following in a few weeks with her father. He wants to meet you before he gives his blessing." Silas grinned. "I think he wants to make sure I am not some drifter who will leave his daughter stranded." "Smart man," Wade said with a chuckle. "Your mother is going to be thrilled. She has been hoping you would find someone special." Sarah arrived 3 weeks later, and she was perfect. A petite redhead with a quick wit and warm smile, she fit into the family immediately. Wade could see how much his son loved her, and she clearly adored Silas. Her father, a gruff cattleman named Frank Butler, grilled Wade and Willa about their ranch operations and financial stability before finally nodding his approval. "You have raised a good son," Frank told Wade. "Sarah could not do better." The wedding was held that autumn, a bigger affair than Wade and Willa's simple ceremony had been. Friends and family came from across Oregon and beyond to celebrate. Wade gave Sarah away since her father had returned to Texas, and when he placed her hand in Silas's, he felt the circle of life completing itself. He had been given Willa through an arranged marriage that became love. Now his son had found his own love match, and the ranch would continue into the next generation. Time continued its relentless march. The twins eventually married as well. Emma to a horse breeder from California, and Alina to a lawyer from Oregon City. Both couples settled nearby, creating an extended family network throughout the valley. Wade and Willa gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, turning over more responsibility to Silas and Sarah. They had earned the right to take things easier, to spend their days doing only what they wanted rather than what needed to be done. On a warm summer afternoon in 1915, Wade and Willa sat on their porch swing, as they had done countless times over the nearly 4 decades of their marriage. Wade was 63 now, his dark hair gone gray, his body bearing the wear of years of hard work. Willa was 56, still beautiful in his eyes, though time had left its marks on her as well. "You have any regrets?" Wade asked, a question that had been on his mind lately as he felt the weight of his years. Willa considered, as she always did, taking his question seriously. "I regret the years I wasted being angry at my father, though I suppose that shaped who I became. I regret some harsh words spoken in anger to people I loved, but regret our life together. Never, not for a single moment. I regret that I cannot give you more years," Wade said quietly, "that eventually we will have to say goodbye." Willa gripped his hand tightly. "Do not talk like that. We still have time, plenty of time. I know. But when the time comes, I want you to know something. You made me happier than I ever thought possible. Coming here, meeting you, building this life together, it was the greatest adventure of my life. I would not change a single thing." "Wade Finnegan, if you keep talking like that, you will make me cry," Willa said, her voice thick with emotion. "Good tears, I hope. The best tears." They sat together as the sun painted the valley in gold and amber. Two people who had been given to each other by contract and legal obligation, who had transformed that obligation into a love story for the ages. The deed had come with the land, and the land had come with a bride, and Wade had inherited both at once. From that strange beginning had grown something neither of them could have predicted, a partnership of equals, a love that deepened with every passing year, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter ringing out clear and sweet. Cattle grazed in the meadows, horses galloped in the corrals. The Broken Pine Ranch was thriving, just as it had been when Wade first arrived all those years ago, only now it was even better, enriched by decades of love and labor. "We did good, did we not?" Wade said, his arm around Willa's shoulders. "We did better than good," Willa replied, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "We did extraordinary." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Wade Finnegan looked out over his land, his family, his life, and knew with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man who had ever lived. He had come to Oregon seeking only an inheritance. Instead, he had found his home, his heart, and the love of his life in a remarkable woman who had taught him that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. The deed had come with the land, and the land had come with a bride. And from that unlikely beginning had grown a love story that would be told and retold through generations of Finnegans to come. A testament to the power of partnership, courage, and love freely given even when it was not required. Their story would become part of the ranch's history, woven into the very soil of Broken Pine. A reminder that the best foundations are built not on contracts or obligations, but on respect, trust, and love that grows deeper with every sunrise shared together.